I should be thankful, Faith. Life is fair. Those were the words my mother had just spoken, and they hung in the room like a punishment. I stared down at the ceramic mug in my hands. It was plain white with faded blue letters that said, World's Okayest Daughter. The price sticker was still stuck on the bottom. $5.47 from the clearance shelf at the dollar store a few blocks away. I knew because I had seen it there myself 2 weeks ago and thought, who would ever give this to their own child? Now I had my answer. My mother would. Across the living room, through the huge bay windows my parents added last summer, I could see my younger sister Brittany posing beside a brand new Lexus LX 600 parked in the driveway. The car was midnight black with shiny chrome trim, and a giant gold bow was stretched across the hood like something out of a holiday commercial. That gift cost $117,000. I knew because my father announced the price happily while handing her the keys. My name is Faith. I'm 29, and I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, right here in this very house, standing now with a $5 mug while my sister beamed next to her six-figure luxury SUV. This had been the story of my life for as long as I could remember. Brittany received everything, and I stood by watching. Brittany was celebrated, and I was handled. She was the daughter they adored, and I was the daughter who simply came first. Did you hear me? My mother said sharply. She spoke with that same impatient tone she always reserved for me. I said you should be grateful. I lifted my eyes from the mug and looked at her. Diana was 53, still stunning in that polished country club way she worked hard to maintain. Weekly salon visits, monthly spa days, perfectly styled blonde hair, flawless makeup, and a Christmas sweater that probably cost more than my entire month of groceries. Grateful, I repeated slowly, letting the words sit in my mouth like something unpleasant. Yes, grateful. Not everyone gets anything for Christmas. Some people have nothing. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to yell. Instead, I just nodded the way I'd learned to over 29 years of being the afterthought. Outside, I watched my father, Gregory, wrap an arm around Brittany's shoulders as she held up the keys. They both grinned for my aunt's phone camera. Brittany was 25, worked part-time at a small boutique, and had never paid a single bill. She still lived at home in a bedroom that had been remodeled 3 separate times to match whatever style she wanted next. Meanwhile, I moved out at 18, paid my own way through college while juggling 2 jobs, and now managed the accounting department at Hollowgate Systems, a company where I'd worked my way up over 7 years. But to my parents, none of that mattered. It never did. Faith, come outside and take a picture with your sister, my aunt called from the doorway, cheerful and completely unaware of the tension burning inside me up. I set the mug down on the coffee table and walked toward the front door, my body moving on autopilot. The December cold stung my cheeks the second I stepped outside, and I wrapped my arms around myself, wishing I had grabbed my coat. Stand next to Brittany, my father said without even glancing at me. Try to smile. I stood beside her. Brittany practically glowed with satisfaction. She smelled like the expensive new perfume she had also gotten that morning, some designer scent in a crystal bottle. Can you believe it? She whispered, pretending to be sweet. Daddy said I deserved something special for finally finishing my associate's degree. She had taken 6 years to finish a 2-year program. I finished my bachelor's in 3.5 while working full-time. Still, all I said was, "Congratulations." The words scraped painfully on the way out. The camera flashed. I didn't need to see the photo to know exactly how it looked. Brittany glowing beside a luxury car, and me slightly hunched, slightly faded, slightly invisible. Just like always. Back inside for Christmas brunch, I caught my mother watching me with that same look of mild disappointment she had worn at every major moment of my life. My high school graduation, my college graduation, my promotion. No matter what I achieved, nothing ever seemed good enough to compare to Brittany simply being Brittany. Faith, can you help set the table? Diana asked. Brittany is too excited to focus. Of course she was. And of course I would help. Because that was who I was in this family. The helper, the reliable one, the one they counted on to do the work while giving nothing but criticism in return. I picked up a stack of plates from the china cabinet and began placing them around the dining table, my hands moving by memory, while my mind churned with thoughts I had pushed aside for years. Something about this Christmas felt different. The mug still sat on the coffee table like a piece of evidence, and when I read those faded letters, "World's okayest daughter," something inside me shifted. Maybe that was really how they saw me. As I laid the silverware next to each plate, memories poured into my mind all at once. Birthdays, holidays, every big moment where Brittany soaked up all the praise while I waited in the background for even a sliver of attention that never came. I remembered my 16th birthday. My parents threw Brittany a huge party for her 10th that same week, then told me we'd celebrate mine later. Later never happened. I got a card with $20 inside and a quick apology about being too busy with Brittany's party. I remembered my high school graduation when my father spent most of the ceremony texting relatives about Brittany's dance recital coming up the next weekend. He didn't even look up when I walked across the stage. I remembered college, when I asked for help with tuition. They actually laughed. They told me that money was saved for Brittany because she needed more support than I did. "You're smart enough to figure it out," my mother said. "Brittany needs us more." I remembered Christmas 3 years ago, when I saved for months to buy my parents the pricey espresso machine they had been wanting. They opened the espresso machine, looked at it for maybe 5 seconds, and then spent the next hour fussing over the designer purse they had bought for Brittany. The espresso machine ended up in their garage and hasn't been touched to this day. I thought about last Thanksgiving, when I drove 4 hours through a snowstorm just to be with them. When I finally arrived, cold, exhausted, and relieved to have made it safely, I learned they had already eaten. Brittany was too hungry to wait, so they went ahead without me. My plate was sitting on the counter, cold and forgotten, while they sat around laughing and sharing stories from family memories that somehow never included me. Their behavior was so constant, so predictable, that over time, I convinced myself it was normal. I told myself every family had a favorite child, and I just happened not to be that child. I brushed off the sting every time it happened, telling myself I was being dramatic or too sensitive. I believed that if I accomplished more, if I worked harder, if I proved myself worthy, then one day they would finally notice me. But standing there in the dining room with a stack of plates in my hands and that $5 mug sitting in the living room like a joke at my expense, something finally became clear. They did notice me. They always had. And every single year, they chose to treat me as less. "Faith, the napkins need to be folded properly," my mother said, suddenly at my side. Her voice carried that sharpness she always used with me. "Not like that. Here, let me show you." She took the napkin out of my hands and demonstrated an overly complicated fold, as if I hadn't done this exact task at every holiday for the last 10 years. As if I couldn't grasp the simplest things. "Sorry," I said, the word coming out flat and empty. "You should pay more attention. Brittany would have done it right the first time." I doubted that. Brittany had never folded a napkin in her life. But I kept that thought to myself. I just nodded and continued working, jaw tight and full of words I wasn't allowed to speak. Once the table was finally set and the food arranged, everyone gathered for brunch. My father took the head of the table. Brittany sat at his right side like some kind of princess. My mother sat at the opposite end with my aunt. I was placed in the middle, not important enough to sit at either end, not cherished enough to be by my parents. "Let's go around and say what we're grateful for," my father said, holding up his glass of orange juice. "Brittany, you start." Brittany smiled, her bright, perfect smile that always opened every door for her. "I'm grateful for the best parents ever, who always support me and believe in me. And for my amazing new car, obviously. Everyone laughed warmly. My father practically glowed. I'm grateful for this wonderful family, my mother added, and for another year of health and happiness. My aunt shared something similar. Then the table went quiet as everyone looked at me. Their eyes felt like spotlights, waiting for me to pretend to be thankful. I'm grateful for clarity, I said softly. A sharp silence followed. I saw my mother's expression tighten. Clarity about what? Brittany asked, her voice carrying a hint of challenge. About a lot of things, I said. About what matters. About where I stand. My father coughed awkwardly. Well, that's nice, Faith. Very thoughtful. Now let's eat before everything gets cold. The rest of the meal passed without any major problems, but I could feel my mother's eyes on me the whole time. She sensed something was different. She could feel the shift in me, the same way animals sense a storm coming. But she didn't say anything. She probably assumed whatever I was feeling would pass, just like it had so many times before. After brunch, I started clearing the table while Brittany took relatives outside to admire her new Lexus. The kitchen seemed to shrink around me as I rinsed plates and loaded the dishwasher. You seem quiet today, my aunt said gently as she dried a serving dish next to me. Just tired, I replied, forcing a small smile. The holidays can be exhausting, she said, unaware of the real reason for my silence. I finished the dishes without saying much. My hands worked, but my mind was somewhere far away. I kept thinking about my apartment across town, my little one-bedroom place that had slowly become the only space where I truly felt at peace. I thought about the savings I had built up through years of careful budgeting, about the independence I had earned without anyone's help, and about the life I had created far away from a family that treated me like an extra piece of furniture in their home. And most of all, I thought about what I needed to do next. The afternoon dragged on forever as people came and went, each one eager to admire Brittany's new car. They took turns sitting in the leather seats, touching the dashboard, and gasping at all the high-end features most people only saw in commercials. Every single person said the same thing, that she was so lucky, that the car was stunning, that our parents were beyond generous. My parents soaked up every compliment, standing tall with pride like they were the ones being celebrated. The car wasn't just a gift to Brittany. It was a display, a badge of their success and their image as perfect parents. And of course, not one person asked what I had gotten. No one seemed to notice the mug or me, standing quietly in the corner like a forgotten object. The heated seats are amazing, my cousin Jennifer said after her own little joyride. Brittany, you're so lucky. Your parents are incredible. I know, Brittany said with a satisfied smile. They really are the best. I watched my mother practically glow at the praise. She loved being admired. To her, Brittany's luxury car wasn't just a present. It was a sign to the world that she had done everything right. The cheap mug she handed me wouldn't be mentioned to anyone. As the sunlight faded outside, I found myself back in my old bedroom. Years ago, my parents had changed it into a guest room, removing every trace that I ever lived there. The walls that once held my posters were now painted beige, decorated with generic artwork that had no connection to me at all. It was as if my entire childhood had been erased. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Brittany leaning on the doorframe with that familiar smug smile. Enjoying the view? She asked, nodding toward the driveway where her Lexus was glowing in the last light of the day. It's a nice car, I said, keeping my voice even. Nice? She laughed sharply. Faith, it's a $117,000 vehicle. Nice doesn't even come close. Then what word would you use? I asked. Deserved, she answered without hesitation. I worked hard, and Mom and Dad recognized that. I don't expect handouts like some people. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. Brittany, who had never paid rent, never bought her own groceries, never worked a full-time job, was lecturing me about handouts. Right, I said quietly. Congratulations again. You could at least try to be happy for me. She stepped closer, waiting for jealousy to show on my face. But I guess that's too much to expect from someone like you. Someone like me? I repeated. Someone who's always been jealous of everything I have, she said. Mom told me you've been sulking all day about your gift. She said you should be grateful you got anything at all, considering how little you contribute to this family. The words hit hard, but I refused to react. I had been enduring comments like this my entire life. I had learned how to keep my face still, even when my chest felt tight. I'm not sulking, I said calmly, and I am grateful. Grateful for clarity. Brittany rolled her eyes. There you go with that clarity stuff again. What does that even mean? It means I finally understand exactly where I stand in this family. Something in my voice made her expression flicker for a moment, but she quickly recovered, flipping her hair again. You've always stood in the same place, she said with a cold smile. Behind me, where you belong. She turned and walked down the hallway, the sound of her designer heels echoing against the wood floors my parents installed last year. I watched her go, and something inside me settled, something cold, steady, and unshakable. Not anger, something stronger. Resolution. Dinner that evening was simple. Leftovers from brunch laid out on the counter. I sat at the kitchen island, pushing food around my plate while everyone chatted around me. Brittany, we should take the car on a road trip, my mother said excitedly. Maybe to that spa in Tennessee you wanted to visit. Oh my gosh, yes, Brittany clapped her hands. That would be perfect. A mother-daughter trip in my new car. I waited for someone to include me. I waited for them to say, Faith should come too, or let's make it a family trip. But no one even glanced at me. They continued planning dates and talking about shopping and scenic routes, as if I hadn't been sitting 3 feet away. That's when I made my choice. I quietly excused myself and went back to the guest room that used to be mine. I shut the door gently. The bed was neatly made with pillows I didn't recognize, and a throw blanket lay across the foot like something out of a hotel. Nothing in the room belonged to me anymore. I sat down and took out my phone. I scrolled to the number for my apartment complex. I'd been on a month-to-month lease for a while, thinking I'd eventually sign a longer one. Tonight, that eventually became right now. Then I texted my friend Gina, who had offered to help me move some furniture I'd been storing. Can you meet me tomorrow morning around 10 o'clock? Her reply popped up almost immediately. Of course. Everything okay? Everything was finally coming together. That's what I typed back. For my entire life, I had waited for my family to truly see me, to treat me with basic respect, to acknowledge that I mattered. I had spent years bending myself into whatever shape I thought might earn their approval, giving up my own needs and wants for love that never actually came. But tonight, that ended. Tonight, I wasn't just walking away from this house. I was walking away from the version of myself who settled for scraps while my sister got everything. I was done believing I was somehow worth less. I was ready to step into a future where I could finally be free. Around 8 o'clock that evening, I walked out of the bedroom with my mind made up, keeping my face calm and unreadable. I had years of practice hiding my feelings around my family, and those skills made the rest of Christmas Day easier to get through. The living room was warm and glowing, the fire crackling while everyone relaxed on their expensive sofas, chatting about plans for the new year. Brittany was glued to her phone, probably uploading photos of her new car to her followers. My mother skimmed through a magazine, pointing things out to my aunt every few minutes. My father was dozing off in his recliner, still full from the big holiday dinner. I sat in the same armchair by the window, the one piece of furniture that had unofficially become mine over the years because nobody else wanted it. It sat slightly apart from the rest of the room, close enough to count as part of the group, but far enough to feel like I wasn't really included. Faith, you've been really quiet today, my aunt said gently from the sofa. Are you okay? Before I could even answer, my mother jumped in. Faith is just being Faith, Diana said with a dismissive wave. She gets moody during the holidays. She should be grateful she has a family to spend time with instead of being alone in that tiny apartment of hers. Her words stung, but I kept my expression calm. I'm fine, Aunt Patricia, just tired from the drive yesterday. The drive? My mother repeated sharply. It's barely 45 minutes from where you live. Brittany drove 3 hours last month to see her friend in Cincinnati and didn't complain once. Of course she didn't. Brittany never had to complain. Everything in her life was handed to her. I wasn't complaining, I said quietly. I was just explaining why I'm tired. You always have an excuse, my mother said, now fully focused on me. The magazine was forgotten. That's been your problem forever, Faith. You never just accept things gracefully. You always turn everything into something about you. My hands tightened in my lap where no one could see. The irony of her accusing me of making things about myself, after she'd spent the whole day praising one daughter and ignoring the other, almost made me laugh. I'm not making anything about me, I answered, keeping my voice steady. I'm just sitting here, not bothering anyone. Your attitude is bothering me, Diana snapped. You should be happy for your sister. She worked hard for that car. She didn't work for the car, I said before I could stop myself. You and Dad bought it for her. Silence hit the room instantly. My father blinked awake, sensing the tension. Brittany finally looked up from her phone, eager for drama. Excuse me? My mother said coldly. I just meant she didn't earn the money herself, I explained. You gifted it to her. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I'd call hard work. Faith, my father warned, the same tone I had heard 100 times before. That's enough. I'm not trying to start anything, I said, raising my hand slightly. I was just clarifying. You were being jealous, Brittany cut in, putting her phone down. As usual, you can't stand that Mom and Dad love me more. The words hit me hard, not because I didn't expect them, but because she said them so casually, as if she was stating a simple fact. Brittany, my aunt said quietly, that's not a kind thing to say. Why not? Brittany replied. It's true. Faith has always been jealous. That's why she moved out the second she could. That's why she rarely visits. She can't stand that I'm the successful daughter. I looked at my sister, really seeing her. She wasn't just spoiled. She was cruel. And she had learned that cruelty from parents who had always placed her above me. I think I'm going to head to bed early, I said, standing. Merry Christmas, everyone. Faith, wait, my mother called out as I reached the doorway. We need to talk about your attitude. This is exactly why you're still single at 29. Men don't want women who can't be happy for others. I almost laughed. My dating life had absolutely nothing to do with this, yet she still managed to turn it into a weapon. You're right, I said flatly. Thank you for the feedback. I'll work on being more grateful. Don't take that tone with me. What tone? I thanked you. I said I'll work on it. What else do you want? Before she could answer, my father cut in. Just go to bed, Faith. We'll talk tomorrow when everyone has calmed down. I nodded and walked away, my heart pounding with anger and grief. They would never understand how their words affected me. They would never recognize how 29 years of neglect had chipped away at me. But that was all right, because after tonight, their opinions would no longer control me. I closed the guest room door and leaned against it, breathing deeply to steady myself. The conversation had hurt, but it had also made everything crystal clear. Any remaining doubt about my decision was gone. I pulled out my phone and began mentally listing what I needed to take care of next. My apartment was already furnished. I had never really moved out. I had only packed some clothes and toiletries for the Christmas visit. My car was still parked on the street because the driveway had been cleared for Brittany's brand new Lexus. My purse was in the closet with my wallet, keys, and everything I needed to leave. All I had to do now was wait. The next few hours dragged by in heavy silence. I stayed in the guest room, pretending to sleep but lying wide awake, listening to the sounds of my family downstairs. My mother's sharp comments, my father's deep murmur, Brittany's bursts of laughter. Around 11 o'clock, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Someone paused outside my door for a moment and then continued down the hall to Brittany's room. Most likely my mother, checking on her favorite child before bed. I stared into the darkness, mentally reviewing my plan for the 100th time. I would wait until everyone was fully asleep, maybe around 1 or 2 in the morning. Then I'd quietly collect my things and leave. No dramatic goodbye. No emotional confession. I would simply walk out of their lives the same way they had quietly pushed me out of their hearts years ago. But as the night passed, I thought about leaving a note, not an emotional speech, because they'd never care about my feelings anyway, but something brief and clear. Something that showed this wasn't an impulsive move, but a conscious decision. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed, erased, typed again, until I settled on something that felt exactly right. Thank you for the clarity this Christmas provided. I wish you all a fair and balanced life, the kind you always told me I should be grateful for. My key is on the counter. Please don't contact me. Short, direct, and impossible for them to twist. By 1:30 a.m., the house had gone completely still. That deep, settled quiet only comes once everyone is truly asleep. I waited another half hour just to be sure, then slowly got out of bed. I put on the clothes I'd laid out earlier: jeans, a warm sweater, my winter coat. I gathered my toiletries from the bathroom, careful not to make a sound, and packed everything into my overnight bag. By the time I finished, the guest room looked exactly the same as when I'd arrived. Cold, neutral, forgettable. Just like my place in this house. I crept down the stairs, carefully stepping over the third one, which always creaked. The kitchen was dark except for the small nightlight my mother kept by the stove, casting a dim glow across the granite counters and stainless steel appliances. I reached into my purse, took out the house key my parents had once given me, back when they at least pretended to want me around, and set it gently on the counter. Then I placed the folded note beside it, standing there in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by signs of their comfort and privilege. I felt oddly calm. This had never really been my home. I had always been an outsider here, tolerated, but not wanted. And tonight, I was simply making that truth official. I picked up the ceramic mug I had left on the coffee table earlier. World's okayest daughter. For a moment, I thought about leaving it behind as proof of their cruelty. But something in me shifted. I decided to take it instead. A reminder of everything I was choosing to walk away from. A symbol of the disrespect I was done accepting. I tucked the mug into my bag and walked to the front door. Through the window, I could see Brittany's Lexus parked in the driveway, the gold bow still sitting proudly on the hood. $117,000 worth of parental approval wrapped in a shiny ribbon. I turned the deadbolt slowly, holding my breath as the lock clicked open. Then I eased the door open just enough to slip outside into the cold night.